Hola, mi gente. Welcome to another episode of Wine and Chisme. I have a guest here today who is all about helping you build bold moves, make those moves, whether it's, really across countries, across areas, but we can make bold moves in so many ways. So I want you to help me welcome Dr. Analia Gomez-Vidal. Hola, Analia. How are you?
Hola, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me today.
I am so glad you're here because I feel like right now, in particular, there's a lot of people who are looking to move out of the country, out of the US. There is a lot of uncertainty
Yes.
in the world today, and I feel like people are trying to look at what are their options,
Mhm.
whether it's to build a better life, whether it's to feel safe,
Mhm.
whether there's just a whole plethora of things that people are looking at, and people don't even know where to,
Yeah.
if it's good for them, right?
Mhm.
Where to start, and is this something that they should do? So I'm super excited to have you here to talk about it, to share your experiences, and yay. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm particularly excited for the chisme part of all of this. Um, but yes, like you were saying, I specialize in supporting people through bold moves, and the first thing that I always say is that bold moves are built from within. I am no stranger to them. If anything, I chose to come to the U.S. and continue to build a career full of uncertainty and pivots, and find my way through it while also supporting others that are crafting their own path, right? But that is not immediate. That is not overnight. And there is a lot that goes internally at each step of the way. And so a lot of the work that I do has to do with both accompanying people and walking with them through that process of really connecting with who they are, what they want for themselves, how they want to go about it, and really turning that into action, but also really engaging in the more thoughtful and in-depth conversations about what it really means and what it takes, because it is a choice that we make on the daily. I think that for a lot of us there is this constant wondering internally of like, do I stay here, do I go, where to next, like what is the right step for me?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to read your bio,
Hmm.
and then we are going to share what we're drinking, and we will get into, like, I always like to say, like, this isn't your tia's chisme. We get to spill the chisme on ourselves here. So we'll get into that. So, Dr. Analia Gomez-Vidal, CPC, is the founder and CEO of AGV Services LLC and also the host of Lucky to Be Here podcast. She is a bilingual researcher and career development expert whose coaching, thought leadership, facilitation, and speaking empowers individuals and organizations design and implement career development solutions that speak to who they are. She is known for a soulful coaching approach with high-level strategic thinking. Clients work with her to gain language, tools, and a new sense of self-trust to create and pursue new opportunities with purpose. She has over 15 years of experience across multiple industries and connections working for prestigious organizations such as the Fulbright Commission, the Inter-American Development Bank, and Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. Girl, you got a lot of experience. She has her academic and professional training includes a BA degree in economics with a minor in journalism, an MA degree in international studies from the University, I can't talk today, Universidad Torcuato de Tella in Buenos Aires. Did I say that? De Tella?
Torquato di Tella.
Okay. Argentina, and an MA and PhD degrees in government and politics from the University of Maryland College Park. I mean, literally, her credentials go on and on, but we don't have, but we got to continue with it because she just, like, or else we might be here for 15 minutes just going over her credentials. That's how accomplished this woman is.
I mean, and we can, go in depth into that as part of the journey to, the being the good student to the one who kind of like takes leaps constantly.
Yes, girl, right? Because that's a lot. So before we start our chisme, share with me what you are drinking today.
Well, today I'm having my mate. So for anyone who is familiar with Argentine mate, is the best way that I can describe it is, like it's a sort of tea that we drink constantly in Argentina. And I was not used to drinking as often by myself until more recently. But yeah, but today I'm continuing drinking my mate throughout the day.
So we have a big bag of it here, but I don't
Hmm.
know how to make it. So, like the right way. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna afterwards, or you're gonna have to teach me how to make it the right way.
I'm happy to.
So I am drinking, this is called Concho Orange. It is from the Georgia area, not Georgia the state, Georgia the country. And this was sent to me by their distributors here in the US. They'd actually sent me. So this is, I just opened it. It's an orange wine. I have not tried it. So I'm going to get to try it with you for the first time. It's hot. I'm here. Where are you based out of?
I'm based in the DC metro area.
Oh, okay. I have friends out there. I am based in San Diego and it is hot here today. Like it's I think it's close to 90 degrees today.
Oh.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hot summer. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna open this. I'm gonna put it in the freezer because I didn't have time. I forgot to put it in the fridge overnight. And this one I'm gonna have. So salud.
Salud.
Oh, this is a I don't know if this is definitely I don't know if I expected this, but I do
Mhm.
like it. It's definitely a wine that you want. It's a lot lighter and trying to think of what I think it smells like on the nose because normally I feel like I'm pretty good about generally getting the smell,
Mhm.
but it's really light. It's really light on the nose. It's not too heavy. I don't know.
A fun fact about me is I come from Argentina, which is known
Yes,
for its wine. I know nothing about wine.
really.
Yes.
That's so funny. No, it's it's a really light flavor. In fact, hey, it's so hot. Like it definitely like stone fruit,
Hmm.
but I can't pick out which one. Like a little bit, like at the end of the taste, it's like a little bit of apricot, but not a sweet apricot, kind of like before it hits that sweetness,
Hmm.
the little tartness. That's kind of what
Yeah.
I'm getting from this, but it's good. I like, I don't like my stone fruit super sweet. I like it with a little bit of tartness, like right before
Mm.
it like you push on it, it has a teeny tiny give, but not
Yeah.
a lot. So then it's still like a little bit firm.
Hmm.
It's not like, so juicy. It's not dripping. I don't like it like that. I like it a little juicy. So, but this is good. Okay, I'm gonna enjoy this today.
Excellent.
Yes. Oh, and look, it almost matches what I'm wearing.
Hmm.
Didn't even realize. Well, let's get into it because as you inferred, you are from Argentina, you're from Argentina. Um, Tell us about growing up. I do have some
Hmm.
friends who are from Argentina and everything, and I know everybody has a different experience, but I would love to hear what your experience was growing up in Argentina and not only maybe the dynamic between what you wanted and what your parents expected, because those are not always the same.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so I was born the eldest in my family. I have a couple more sisters, but I was the eldest for a few years. And I was born into a family where both of my parents are first generation in Argentina, and all of my grandparents came from Galicia, from the north of Spain. Um, and so when I was growing up, I was very much immersed in this environment where it was a working class neighborhood, like of immigrants who had come to Argentina during like the 50s. Um, and so that's the environment that I grew up in. I actually didn't realize until recently that I basically grew up used to broken Spanish
So let
because,
me ask you a question really quick because of what you like.
yes.
So is this immigrant community, was this like the immigrants that came from Germany after World War II or a different area?
These were all immigrants that were coming from Spain, Italy, Portugal. And it was very much people who have moved away because they did not have enough to, sustain themselves, or, like their family members are starting coming in waves to,
Mhm.
hacer la América. That's why I often to me, I always refer to my own background and story and my family's story as the America's dream. Because, like, I don't
Oh,
resonate
I
as
love
much with
that.
the American dream necessarily, but rather with the trajectory and the arc of our entire experience and how it has, been connected over time. So, yeah,
I just
so
had to ask because I'm like obsessed, like anything from that time, I like obsess over it. I've watched so many documentaries and
yeah.
everything. So I was like, ooh, what kind of cheese is there?
Yeah, it's not that type of chisme. Um, but I did, like I grew up very much with the stories of them, with the chismes, right? Of the family growing up. And so one of my grandmas was sent to Argentina at age 15 to be a maid in an uncle's house because there was not enough food for all of the family in Galicia. Another one of my grandparents slept in public squares for a while
Oh,
figuring out, how to like find their footing. And so there was a wide range of stories growing up, all of them about kind of like this immigrant ethos of like working hard and, finding your way through the struggles and the hardship. And so my parents were both raised in that mentality and like very much like the rigidity also of their upbringing. And so I was raised as the eldest with that kind of like with that approach and the perspective that education was the way forward. And so like the expectation growing up was that I needed to be a good student, that my job was to be a good student, and that my obligation was to reach college degree. And so luckily for me, I have always been a nerd, and so I really enjoyed studying. And so, when they told me, well, the way forward is through education, and I like studying, and, I was praised for getting good grades and doing good in school, that was my way forward. The thing though was that, in an environment like that one, there is also a lot of like rigidity and very specific mandates and rules. And I do have a little bit of a rebellious streak, and I didn't necessarily always like that. So my way forward was also, like studying and making the most out of the resources that were made available to me, while also figuring out what my own way was going to look like. And so I graduated college, and then I didn't stop studying. And so that's when I started like pursuing my master's degrees, and eventually I moved to the US to pursue my PhD as well, which was in nowhere's radar. Because to my family, and particularly my parents, the idea of somebody else paying for my education, let alone a university in the US, was completely bananas. So, like, they didn't even think that was possible.
I want to kind of go back to what you said because being the eldest daughter myself, um, there's always like obviously there's a lot of responsibility that is held when you're the eldest daughter. But I always feel like you know, sometimes you fully conform to that, but sometimes we conform as much as we possibly can without, but also trying to find the holes where we could kind of exploit to
Mhm.
express ourselves. So, was that kind of what kind of eldest daughter were you? And if you were the latter, how
Yeah.
did you try and like get past those things of conformity to find who you are?
Yeah. So there were a couple different things. I've I have always been like I used to be too, but like to this day, very much the kid with a lot of emotions. The kid that I was told like, Analia, calmate. Like, like you cannot be so emotional. All of these different things. And so one of the first go-tos for me was writing. So growing up, I would very much like write poetry. I would like write different things. And, I was also good at school. So then I was praised for it. And eventually my writing then morphed, right? And so like it became more about school. Then for a while, I worked as a journalist. And so there was a praise for writing as a journalist. And then eventually as a researcher. And so there is like the academic path. And so I always found a way to kind of like express myself through that. But for the most part, the thing that I've always used to kind of like find my moments of freedom was also education. And the reason why was because I was very much the kid who was either at school or in extracurriculars. And so because my mom was also caregiver to elderly relatives and so on, like I was very independent. I would just like go between places and just like do my own thing. And that has always been the case for the most part, especially as a teenager. But those were the pockets of freedom that I would have because either I would do my own thing or there would be, blocks of time in between activities where I would do my own thing. And so I would find ways or excuses to be busy, but also having more flexibility and freedom for myself and time and space for myself, to the point that I would actually sign up for taking summer classes just so that I could just be out of the house and doing my own thing.
They're like, when is she coming home? I don't know. I think she has summer classes. Like we don't know. And then you even if you were done, you're like, well, were you a little callejera?
Oh, not a little, a
A
hundred
lot.
percent.
I
Uh,
was too.
and then the one thing that, this is one of those stories that kind of like painted the picture of who I am and who I am in my family size. But there is this very famous story of how, because I was the eldest, it got to a point that, they needed to send me to school. And so, like, they sent me to pre-K. Like, when I was like 3, they sent me to school in Argentina. And the very first day of school, my mom was like heartbroken of the idea of like, oh, she's gonna miss me and she's going to have such a hard time and etc. And so there we are in at the door of the school. And so she drops me off and I turn around, I wave at her and I say, "Bye, mom, pick me up later." And I walk and I just leave. And my mom walks all the way from that school to
Then she
to
was crying because you weren't
crying
crying.
crying and just completely destroyed, thinking that her daughter didn't love her, because how is it possible this 3 year old just like said bye, pick me up later, and just went ahead. Um, and my dad, not kindly, pointed out this story when I moved to the US in the airport to my mom. So he would,
A repeat, like a flashback to when you're in pre-K.
yeah, so he would go like, see, she did it when she was 3, she's doing it when she's 25.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Interestingly enough, like kind of similar and different when there was a time when none of like I was living in Texas. My middle sister lives in, she's been living in Oregon for over 20 years now. And my youngest sister was living in Oklahoma. And I'm talking to my mom, and she's like all sad because we're all so far away. Because, we grew up all here in California. And she's like, I miss you guys. I'm so sad. You guys have all left me. And I remember telling my mom, Mom, why are you sad? You should be happy that you guys raised us to be independent and confident enough in ourselves
Hmm.
that we feel like we can move away. And
Yeah.
I moved back. My youngest sister, she was only away for college, and then she moved back. But I just had to reiterate that to my mom. I'm like, you and dad raised us with the confidence in ourselves to be able to. So I'm like, so don't cry, be
Hmm.
happy. You did that. Like,
Yeah.
hello. So I love, I know that parents get really sad on the first day of school or like these moments, right? Because they already feel the time slipping away.
Hmm.
But at the same time, parents, as somebody who lived that from the other side, and you can speak to that too, Analia, like you should be so proud of not only your kids, you should be proud of yourself that you
Hmm.
raised kids that felt independent enough and confident enough and secure enough in themselves to be able to leave. I think all kids should like leave it, like move away from their family,
Yeah.
like for at least a few years, like because then you get to know yourself in a
Hmm.
way that you never get to know yourself when you're continually within the family dynamic on the day on a daily. um so when did obviously education was to you, obviously was important to your
Hmm.
parents, but even that's something you valued for yourself. So when you were going through middle school, high school, you obviously found a gift in writing, finding your voice through writing. How was that as far as like the education side? How was that fostered in you
Hmm.
that you knew that, okay, wait, it's not just something that I like, but I think this is something that I could be really good at?
Yeah. What's interesting about it is there are two main things that stand out for me from that part of my upbringing, and they're not necessarily about writing. So, one is I started learning languages when I was a teenager. There was for multiple personal and professional reasons, my parents thought it was a good idea to incentivize me to learn languages. And I started, I was learning English because I was also learning it at school. And then I started learning German, and I was fascinated by French, so I wanted to, in what I thought was good negotiation, when my parents were like, okay, you're gonna go study German. And I was like, well, if I go study German, then I also want to go study French.
No words.
And so, luckily, growing up, my family was not, we were not well off, very like we were comfortable enough, but the one thing that my parents always made sure that was always available was books and education. again, right? I may get inherit clothing from other friends and family around, but the books are going to be there for me. And so I went ahead and I started learning German and French, and I realized I was good at picking up languages, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So eventually, I also learned French and Portuguese and Chinese. And so, like, throughout my entire, like, since I was like 12, 13 years old, I've always been learning multiple languages.
So, do you still speak all of these? Can you still speak all of these languages?
So I can, if someone speaks to me in those languages, especially French and Portuguese, I will understand almost entirely. What has happened though is like since I moved to the US, my brain now functions bilingually. And so I speak and think both in English and Spanish, which also means that the other languages kind of like were left to the side and I haven't practiced them as much. So I feel a little bit less comfortable and confident speaking the languages, but I can pick them up. I actually, I recently started like practicing it again, brushing it up, particularly my French, and I was reading poetry in French, and I was like, oh, okay, for the most part, I can understand everything that I am reading. So yeah,
That's amazing. So it's Spanish, English, German, French, Portuguese, and Mandarin. Is it
and
Mandarin?
Mandarin, yeah. That one is the hardest. I have with me my notebooks from, my notes because I wanted to continue studying while I was here. And then I realized that that was not something compatible with pursuing a PhD.
Yeah. That's six languages, mujer.
See.
Wow. That is awesome. I mean, here, up squirrels outside. I think Daisy's barking. It wasn't the squirrel, it was the neighbor. Six languages. And here, you know what sometimes just blows my mind, right? Is here you get judged if you speak another language, right? Like if actually if English is your first language and you learn another language,
Hmm.
you're not judged. But if you come here and English is not your first language
Hmm.
and you are learning, and English is a very hard language to learn. We have so many crazy rules. We have so many synonyms. We have so, like, and the fact that, and we, and obviously I'm not saying me, but I'm just saying like
Hmm.
as a country as a whole, like to look down on immigrants not speaking English. But I'm going to tell you right now, and I think pretty much everybody on this that would listen would agree, those people are far smarter because they
Hmm.
are constantly having to think into languages. They're
Yeah.
having to translate. So it just gets frustrating to hear when people get made fun of because I'm like, and
Yeah.
what can you speak? You don't even
Yeah.
speak English correctly. Like, but
Or, the other element of it is like the conversation around accents, right? Because like you are constantly like whether someone means well or not, the moment I say something and the response that I get is I hear an accent, where are you from, you may think that you're being friendly, but you're othering me.
yes,
And so for someone like me, I've spent the last 30 years learning and speaking English in different capacities now, like living and fully bilingual, and getting that question is hard because you over time you kind of like learn to roll with it, but it's not an easy question to face because of all the subtext that is underneath it.
yeah.
And yeah, I will say, for me, languages were one of those things that allowed for me to really connect with worlds out there. And at the same time, because I was coming from that environment where always, like I was always listening to this broken Spanish with, like notes of Gallego or Italian or Portuguese, it was also a comfort to a certain extent.
Wine break. Time to refill that glass and come back for more Wine and Chisme. Ever wonder where you can find the wines I drink that are made by people who actually look like us? Mi gente, I got you covered because I created the first and most comprehensive director of Latina owned wine brands based in the United States. And yes, it is exactly as good as it sounds. From California to Puerto Rico and everything in between, I mean, we are talking about over 100 Latina owned wine brands, all in one place, ready for you to discover, sip, and support. This is the directory that I wish existed before I built it. So you never have to search far to find wines that represent our cultura, our gente, and our stories. So head over to the wineandchismepodcast.com to explore the full directory. The link is also in the show notes of every episode, so you have zero excuses not to check it out. Now I want to kind of go into because obviously you when you went to university you started
Hmm.
in Argentina, but you have I mean you've stated already education is your
Hmm.
thing. I mean you have a PhD. But I want to kind of share all of the things. So
Hmm.
you have a BA degree in economics with a minor in journalism,
Hmm.
a master's in international studies, a master's and PhD in government and politics. You hold a certificate in professional coaching, an
Hmm.
energy leadership index, master practitioner. So you could share what that is, and
Hmm.
a core dynamic specialist in transitions certificate from the Institute in Professional Excellence in Coaching School. And you're also an active member of International Coaching Federation of the Applied Improv Network. I mean, like that, like I said, if I would have just read those out one by one, but obviously, I could understand why you would minor in journalism. You liked
Hmm.
that. But I hadn't like it's very as we go through like all of these like degrees and accreditations you have, it's surprising to hear that you have a degree in economics when you were so like just from hearing you, right? You were
Hmm.
so connected to writing and then you minored in journalism. So was the goal to be an like a journalist who
Hmm.
focuses on economics? Like share kind of how you
Yeah.
went from that to international business, international studies and politics and government and
Hmm.
politics. I mean, girl, you've got layers. You should be like with all of those, maybe you should be on one of the networks talking about what the hell is going on.
Well, if anyone wants to hire me. Well, I'm glad you asked that because, I mentioned that there were like two things that stood out for me growing up. One was the languages and the writing did not have as big of a space. And that is because I grew up hearing a lot of statements that I think there were well-intentioned but backfired in the sense that one of the things that I would struggle with growing up was math. I was not, I was very good at languages and writing and all that stuff. I was not that great at math, but I tried because I was a good student. I identified as a good student, so I wanted to, get better at that. And in high school, one of the ways in which I was very much of a nerd is I studied like not economics, but like accounting and adjacent disciplines as part of my high school focus. And so I used to participate in accounting Olympics.
You are a nerd.
I said it from the very beginning. I embrace it fully. I have a no shame.
Nerds
Um,
rule the world. It's okay.
that's who I am to my core. Um, and so I participated in accounting Olympics, and then I got more and more interested in economics as part of my high school time. And so like the last year, instead of going to accounting Olympics, I went to economics Olympics, and that one was basically writing an essay, like a long essay, on a subject about economics. And so I wrote at that time, I think, something about like Argentine economic policy at the time, and thinking about Keynes and kind of like the school of thought behind his work. And so I was very much encouraged by my economics professor throughout those years in high school. And she always believed in me in a way that was really touching for me. And she was not the only one. My history professor was also tremendously encouraging of the work that I would do, my philosophy professor as well. So there was something there. But the thing that always kind of like felt like backfired a little bit was because I was not good at math. I would hear that I was very good at kind of like at the words, but like writing, but that didn't have as much weight as the math. And so it was almost like I had a chip on my shoulder of like proving that I could be good at math and really be, succeed at it. And so when the time came to picking a college degree in Argentina, you have to pick your degree at the beginning. Like there is less variation on, like the classes that you can take and the major that you end up with. And so I at the time I wanted to be a diplomat, which meant that I had to pursue a degree that kind of like helped me get through into that path. And so I was in between law and economics. And there was a part of me that also felt that I needed to prove to myself and to others that I could do this thing. And I could do well in the legal field, but I wanted to prove myself with economics. And so I went ahead and I signed up. And I will say, I almost got kicked out of college because my college
Really?
had a very structured way of going about it, where you couldn't fail more than, like 3 classes in the first 2 years and 3 more classes afterwards. And I failed 3 classes. So there was a point in time at which I had to take one last math final, calculus 3, which I had to take, like, I had to complete 3 times until I was able to pass it. And when I passed it with an A minus, I think, or something like that, because I was like, yeah, at that point, if you don't learn, you don't learn. But the
Right. I've
moment,
taken this 3 times. I had to have learned something.
yeah, but at the moment that I was taking that exam, I had 2 possibilities. If I passed the exam, then I would be able to go as an exchange student to France the following year. If I didn't pass the exam, I got kicked out of college because that was the last course that I could fail.
Wow, talk about all or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I
Yeah.
think it takes a lot of courage to do that because I think most people, what your strength is and you lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
For myself, I went to journalism school and taking college algebra, we had part of that, or I had not college algebra. I had to take a dual class, which was
Mm-hmm.
statistics with
Yeah.
a lab in college algebra. And to this day, I say statistics is the math of the devil because I had to take it twice. Wait, I didn't know only the School of Journalism you could pass with a D. Had I known, I would have tried a little bit harder to just get that D so I could get out of it. But to know, look, this is not my strength, but I want to prove to myself that I could do it. That takes a particular type of personality to do that,
Yes.
Analia. And the fact that you just didn't lean into, you know what, I'm going to go into
Mm-hmm.
law because I already like to write. I know several languages. It could have been very easy. And you made a conscious effort to not take, and not to say that law in any country is easy,
No, absolutely
but
not.
to take something that could have been not as challenging for you,
Yeah.
that is very brave, girl. I applaud you
Yeah.
for that because I wouldn't have done that.
And I will say, going back to journalism, I always had eyed the minor in journalism. Also because during college, I was part of a local radio show with a few friends from high school, and I was writing, and so I was like doing op-eds for the school magazine and stuff like that. And I did that throughout my years of college. So I still had the writing and the journalism happening. And so when I was able to pick classes for the minor, I immediately was like, yes, this is for me. I'll do journalism. But at that moment in time where I was like, well, this can work out and I can like go to Paris and, be an exchange student and complete my degree in economics, or it might not. And then I basically lost everything that I had done because I needed to start over a different degree somewhere else. And I was in the back of my mind, journalism was the way to go for me. I was like, if economics doesn't work, then I'm heading towards journalism. And what's interesting is that before I even graduated from with my economics degree, I got approached to start writing as a freelance journalist for a newspaper in Buenos Aires. And I started writing about economics there. And that's when I realized that I needed a different type of approach from like the approach to economics that I had learned during my college degree. And that eventually led me into the path of international studies and government and politics and so on.
So let me ask, because I don't know much
Hmm.
about um politics in Argentina.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know some recent things that have happened in in regards to money and
We've
right.
made the headlines.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
I know those recent things,
Yeah.
but um as far as like you growing up, because obviously this all feeds in, it's like everything you've done has kind of been a building block to the next thing. So
Yes.
you have your degree in economics with a minor in journalism. Then the next step is international studies. And then you eventually come to the US to get your PhD in government and politics. So I feel like
Hmm.
each one of those things is a building block for the next.
Yes.
So growing up, what was the, whether it's what you perceive to be or what it actually was, because I think
Mhm.
um perception is reality, right? In the
Yeah.
eyes of whoever is looking, through it. So what was your perception in regards to the political climate in Argentina and what
Hmm.
made you want to do international studies? And then beyond that, decide to move to the US to get your
Hmm.
PhD in politics and government, because that's a really big thing to encompass.
Yeah. Um, I had To me, one of the things that has always been interesting is that this is my perspective, but if you grow up in Argentina, and especially during the time that I grew up, where I was like 12 when we had the 2001 crisis, um, politics is inescapable. The thing, though, is that the practice of politics can happen in a lot of different ways, right? So for me, I think a lot of my friends who've also studied economics at some point in their lives, there's also this kind of like wound that existed for all of us as like young kids and early teenagers watching the images of 2001 and the crisis and like everything that we went through at that point in time. And I always have this image of me watching the TV as a 12-year-old, not understanding what was happening, but just like crying out of like not knowing how this is going to get solved and wondering like, what can one do in a situation like this? Right. And so I think I went the intellectual route. I went into the let me learn and dig and connect ideas and really explore to see what's possible and to understand what's happening. And so I think that that has always been a little bit of my way of coping, but also, finding my way through it, which has been, to kind of like putting those building blocks in place so that I could understand reality better. And to a certain extent, like I continue doing it, right? Like now a lot of my work focus is not just on supporting people through their own journeys, but also I am living through my own experience, like going through the immigration process and wondering, and those questions are very real for me. And then there is an intellectual part of it where like I'm constantly either interviewing people or writing about it, or like really sharing all of this exercise as we move forward. And so I think that to me has been the way in which I have always approached it, kind of like observing and just trying to look for ways of understanding, and then bringing that into some type of writing, what or work, just broadly speaking. And then in that pursuit of, my curiosity is endless, and it goes beyond the academic realm, right? Like I have many layers. Many of them are not even scholarship related. But to me, the exercise of thinking, okay, what's the next step, and thinking of the PhD as the next step was both personal in terms of like, okay, what's possible for my life and what do I want next? Living in an environment where in Argentina, it's not a given that you move out of the family home right after graduating high school. In fact, most people do not necessarily do that if they already live close to a university, which is the case if you are in Buenos Aires, or, close enough. And so I lived with my family until I moved to the US, which also meant, I wasn't close to school. And so I always tell, like, I commuted 5 hours per day every day to go to school,
Oh my
and like during
gosh.
college, right? But then I didn't move out of the family home until I moved here. And so it was also finding my way, kind of like the freedom and the flexibility, but at a higher level, not just in the day to day, but in like what's the next step of flexibility and freedom in life for me. And the PhD meant that, but it also professionally, I always say that I did not sign up for a PhD completely bought into the idea that I was going to be a professor. I was open to it, depending on how things played out. But for the most part, I wanted to raise the ceiling of what was possible for my career and for my life. And I felt that like made sense as the next step.
What was the biggest challenge of making that move? Because it's a big move. I mean, you are not only changing because you don't just move to like a place that is not, look, every place has Latinos. I don't think there's any place that doesn't have Latinos anymore because we everywhere.
Yes.
But particularly in the DMV area where you're at, within the DC metro area, just in case people are unfamiliar with what, not Department of Motor Vehicles, right? um, but being in that area, and obviously when you're pursuing a PhD in uh politics and government, I mean that's the place to be at, of anywhere. What were the biggest challenges, because you're coming in from, obviously you know the language, but you don't, but just knowing the language doesn't mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
every region, every state has their own inflections, accents, sayings. So that can get confusing. And
Mm-hmm.
then also, I imagine, and please share with me if this is not
Yeah.
like, are you learning, when you're learning government and politics, I'm guessing you're learning it from a US lens. So
Mm-hmm.
how did that, was that complicated learning it from a US lens versus growing when you lived your entire life into your mid
Mm-hmm.
20s living in Argentina?
Yeah. Um, there are a couple different parts to it. The first one is to get, to the US and start a PhD here. That is a multi-year process. Especially for international students, you want to signal that you're going to be a very competitive candidate in a way that, makes you comparable to domestic students, which means that a lot of us pursue put like graduate school in our home countries or somewhere else before even applying for the US. And then you have the multiple exams, whether that is the GRE, but you also have to take the TOEFL to prove that you are able to study in a different language, in English specifically. And so once I had this vision of, okay, my next step is pursuing a PhD in the US, that was a multi-year process. That was basically, okay, I'm dedicated to finding my way into making it, and getting admitted into a program. And then that has its own complications and trials and tribulations, but like once you get here, there is also this element, like you're saying, like starting on your own, right? I was very lucky that I was working at the Fulbright Commission in Argentina at the time that I was, about to move. And so a few of my colleagues and other people who had received the Fulbright, scholarship to come to the US were also heading here. And so, they, connected me. And so that was a good way of getting started to meet people who were here or were coming here. And then my grad school cohort, like my classmates who were starting with me, many of whom are still close friends and collaborators, they were like my first kind of like core network. Um, but that first night that I landed here and I was trying to understand what College Park looked like and what the basics of life would look like, I sat down on the apartment and started crying, wondering like, did I make the right move? Like I
Is
just
it
left.
really different, like the college experience in the US versus the college experience in Argentina?
For the most part, because of there is this, you come here after seeing the movies and you find yourself in a campus and you're around, it's like, whoa, this is like the movies. So there is that. We don't necessarily have the same system of campus, right, where like you move or you live in a dorm and so on. That can be the experience of like moving away and close to, a college building, when you're not, again, when you're living in a different state or province in Argentina and you have to like move. That's when you do move away from your family home at age 18. But if you are close enough to a university, then you don't have to go through that experience. And we don't have university campus the same way. And so like it's mostly buildings in the middle of the city and you just like go study and then come back. And so there is not as much of being immersed in a college town or like a college experience in the same way.
It's
Um,
just mostly more of a commuter experience versus a lot of campuses across the country in
mhm.
the US. There are a lot of commuter colleges, but then there are a
Yes.
lot that are, yeah, very everything is centralized around the campus and
Hmm.
everything happens around the campus. I find that so interesting. I love I think so many people don't realize the like the complications or how complex it is as an
Hmm.
international student
Yeah.
to apply here. And I didn't realize that there were multiple tests that you had to take to make
Hmm.
sure that you could study in English. Um, what were, because I want to make sure that we're talking, because obviously all of this, like literally all of this builds to what you do, right? It's
Yes.
so like I don't know if I think I've seen a lot of people build up, but it's literally like stair steps for everything that
Hmm.
you've done.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't seem like you veer, like have there been times where you thought you were gonna just completely veer off the path, or if you were like, why did I do this? Why, even when it's coming to the US, especially
Hmm.
right now, right?
Yeah.
If you've ever had regrets or if you ever thought you were gonna quit, if
Hmm.
there was a time where you were just kind of like ready to pull your hair out
Mhm.
or just collapse on the floor being like a total llorona like
100%. Yes. And at every single step, right? There was the moment in which I wasn't sure if I was going to stay in college or not. And, the crying over, like, have I failed? Because, for my family, you start a degree, you finish a degree, like, failing in the middle is like a no-no. Like, your job is to graduate from college. And so, like, there was that moment of, like, what the heck am I going to do? That was graduating, and then I actually for a time I did pursue a master's in economics, and I realized no, like this is the end of the
oh
road.
girl, thank you for
This
saying that because look, you've done a lot and I'm like dang I gotta level up. Let's just talk to Analia. I'm like dang I'm lazy compared to this woman.
But like there was that moment in which I was like, no, this is a very bad idea. And then there was a crisis of faith there. I was like, okay, where do I go next? And it was like, I just need to trust that, like my pull for international studies, what I'm interested in, what I'm starting to write about as a freelance journalist, like that is going to lead my way. And so I did. There was, the figuring out, can I make it? Like, can I really get an admissions letter for a PhD in the US? The thing about my experience so far that I think is true at every step is that for a lot of people who are seeing me along the way, things do not always make sense. But to me, they do. And so then I find my way of connecting it back so that people understand my story. And that to me is one of the biggest messages that I always share and work with people through my work across the board, which is you are the one who gets to tell your story best. And so if you're able to learn about yourself and understand yourself enough so that you can connect the dots backwards and also forwards, then it will make sense. But like you are the one who's in control of being able to do that for yourself and for others.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Now with what you do, because I know that there's so
Mhm.
much more to your story, and I want to hear all of it. But I know, with AGV Labs,
Yeah.
share like what brought you here. What was the catalyst that
Mhm.
you were like, was it nobody has done this? I need to do like what was the catalyst to drive you to create AGV Labs, and what are the things that you focus on for people?
Yeah. So what the again, we could spend a few more hours talking about this, but the long story short is that along the way there were multiple times in which I felt that there was not enough support or information that was needed. That I because I've always been curious and I've always been very entrepreneurial and very much of like a self-motivated starter, I went ahead and I looked for the information, whether it was about career development, about immigration, about anything. Like I am always looking to be on top and understanding what I need, what's the game I'm playing here, like how to like best move forward and etc. But that takes a lot of work, a lot of resources, a lot of privileges that allow for you to do it. And so along the way, I share always the same phrase, which is when I was about to graduate and I was going through the job market as a graduate student, I wanted to succeed for myself, but I also wanted to succeed so that every win of mine can be a resource to others as well. And I felt that deeply as a, graduate student wanting to find my way, whether that was in academia or outside of academia, but I also felt it as an international student. And so I wanted to find a way to become the person that I wish I had by my side when I was going through the process. So that's when I like the kind of like the seed for starting my own business, which became AGV Services LLC, started. And another layer to that was that I also wanted to I wanted more people to understand what it really takes to go through this process and to whether you succeed or not, but like what it really feels like, what it takes, like all the different layers to it. And so that's the seed for what ended up becoming my podcast, Lucky to Be Here, where I'm, showcasing stories of others who, like me, took leaps and built lives and careers across countries, not just in the US, but because there is a new, like, I find that there is a universality to our experiences as immigrants, but also that there is wisdom and lessons from that that can be applied to anyone, even if you don't move abroad.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of like the philosophy, if you want, like behind everything that I am doing. And an example of that is AGV Lab. So AGV Lab is a membership that I created when I started my business, where I what I want is to create an ecosystem where I can walk with you through the process of exploration so that you can like get to know yourself and like connect with your experiences so far and do this a similar exercise to the one that we just did throughout this conversation of kind of like connecting the dots of what my own like stairs look like to where I
So
am
I just took
today.
you through so we just went through the process of what you do.
um Kind of, yeah, like a higher level, we're seeing the outcome of that process, right? But so in AGV Lab, I create an ecosystem where I work with members in live office hours where they bring their career development questions and we talk through them. I develop resources, self-paced resources and recordings that support people at different points in their exploration and give more of a structure and a community. So, like, you're not by yourself, you don't feel as alone, but you're also finding a way of creating that space so that by the time that you want to take your next step career wise, you are equipped with a lot more awareness of what exactly is that you need, what you want to go for, and why. And that's a type of toolkit and resources that it's helpful for you at that specific point in time, but also along the way.
So how many of the people that come to you are seeking to do this with the intention of moving to a different country versus just like career services for
Mhm.
where they are now?
Yeah. Um, I like I have multiple clients who are international students or international workers, but for the most part, it is not necessarily about them wanting to move elsewhere. It's more about the exploration of really understanding what the next step is.
So
And
it's not about them wanting to move elsewhere, it's about them wanting to move.
yes, or like
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 move in their
what's the
career, move in their
next?
personal
Yeah.
life, like just taking action, right?
Yes.
Which
And
seems to be a real theme going on with a lot of my guests right now in
mhm,
regards to um taking action. And I think so often, and we had talked about it recently on my conversation with Vanessa Santos, is, you know, we sometimes get paralyzed in the fear and don't do anything and not realize that just doing something already takes us closer to where we're supposed to be. Because even if it's not what you thought you wanted, at least now you know. So it's like
yes.
the thing is, messy action is better than no action,
Hmm.
but you
Yeah.
need to take action. So, how, like, so what I was looking at your website and it was saying, like, these are, it's an ecosystem designed for individuals seeking clarity, structure, and a supportive community to move from feeling stuck to making strategic progress.
Hmm.
So if you feel struggling to identify what you want next, if you're seeking accountability and guidance to follow through, if you're overwhelmed by too many options, you're dedicated your growth and exploring possibilities, desiring ongoing support and expert guidance, and ready to invest in your journey to see long lasting results.
Hmm.
Like those are the questions you are asking people. If I'm guessing, like, are you ready? Are you ready to even start? Because
Hmm.
if you're like no to these, then are you really ready to start? Or
Yeah.
like are those kind of like the basic questions you want people to even answer before going further to
Hmm.
know like, no, I'm not ready for this yet? Or
Yeah.
like, what do you think for the people who are on the fence of
Hmm.
like, well, I don't know. I mean, I just feel actually, let me ask you another question. I'm going to,
Yeah.
instead of that one, right now, with what's
Hmm.
going on in our country,
Yeah.
not only with immigration, but with everything that's happening overseas, with
Hmm.
everything that's happening with AI,
Yeah.
with everything that's happening in regards to just the economy.
Hmm.
How does that play into how people are coming to you? What are the things that they are most concerned about when they come to you, because they're coming to you for a reason?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing is that I think people resonate with me or come to me because they see someone who is doing the thing, right? And so like I had been through my own process. I ended up like launching myself like headfirst into entrepreneurship. Now, like even outside of my entrepreneurship, but I also I'm expanding my writing even into creative writing, and I have a different ecosystem where I kind of like do that and explore more of my creative writing and my poetry. I have a second podcast on poetry. And so I'm going through that process and learning to then bring it to the table and support others as well. And I think the biggest message that I always think about, especially in a context like this one, is everything that we know as we know it is crumbling. And so
True.
when you are in the middle of the storm, what's the thing that can keep you the most grounded? And so for me, the answer to that is to really understand who we are, what we want, and how want to go about it. And so in a situation like, for example, I was recently reading all the news about the way that we have the advances with AI are making resumes almost, like obsolete. Because as a signal, they're no longer as important because they're like everyone can generate the same resume on AI and cheat the system to move to the next stage, right? And one thing that I have seen with a lot of clients over time is that the resume almost feels like like a safety blanket where you kind of like go around and tweak the resume and try to like get to the optimizing of the resume, but you don't really understand your story. You don't really understand who you are and what you want to bring to the table. And so the resume can make it, but then what is how are you connecting the dots when you're in a conversation with someone who can potentially hire you? And so that level of awareness and understanding of what you are seeking and how you go about it and how you communicate it is essential. And so partly a lot of the emphasis of the work that I do with people has has to do with both that part of like really getting to know themselves and really understanding what is it that they are like most drawn to, how like what trajectory they have, like what are the skills and the traits that they have that they want to leverage as they move forward, and also really decentering the traditional way of thinking about career development, not putting so much emphasis on the resume and how many times you send out a resume, because sending out 500 resumes is tremendously like exhausting but
Yeah.
also non-productive, right? And so then you start doubting yourself and your abilities because of what's happening with the resume. It's not that. And now, even less so. There's also the element of we need to rethink how we're thinking about titles and jobs and industries, because we're seeing how, like entire roles that were tremendously sought after um, 4 or 5 years ago now
Coding.
are gone. right? Or
AI
like,
can code for you. Anybody can be a coder now.
and so there are all these different things where we need to start being a lot more creative and really finding new anchors to feel safer and more secure in the middle of the storm. And so the way that I do that, whether that is like through my free resources, sharing like the content through the podcast and the conversations in between my newsletter, and then also in the membership and working with clients, and even when I work with institutions, it has to do a lot with really thinking about how things are changing and how you can adapt to that change.
That like I think right now, and what are like I would think this sounds, maybe it sounds weird or maybe it doesn't, but I feel like I think so many people, millennials and younger Gen Z,
Mhm.
are having to transition because maybe there's cuts being made and everything, and you get so comfortable in positions that you're in that you're not sure how to pursue the next thing. Because I think once you get to a certain age, if you lose a job, one part is, well, this is what I know how to do, and the other part is like, I know how to do this, but this is not what I want to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've spent how many years in this career and I'm not happy anymore.
Yeah.
And then you have Gen Z and Gen Alpha who know what they want, but they don't know how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you seeing cross generational people coming to you? Are you seeing mostly like millennials and Gen X
Mm-hmm.
coming to you? Like who seems to be most attracted to this?
Yeah. I'm usually working mostly with millennials and so I would say like the because I also, I come from working in academia as an advisor, I kind of like work with everyone who's now in between their, like 22 and 40. And that has been the segment that I have primarily worked with. I've also done coaching, beyond that age range, but for the most part, that has been the focus. And I would say part of the issue that we are encountering has to do with like how to adapt to a different paradigm, right? So like one of the things that comes up a lot is this idea of like I want my dream job. Okay, but first of all, what is a dream job? And like what is the current environment, like what makes it feasible? And there are multiple ways in which I have seen a lot of like the discourse and advice around dating that can also be applicable to professional development. And
Oh, yeah.
one of the things that I tend to point out is, if you're expecting your job to fulfill all the different needs and curiosity and expectations that you have for your life, then you're probably not going to be happy in any job because they're not going to fulfill, like they're not going to be feel fulfilling to you, right? And so what does a life that feels fulfilling to you look like, so that we find ways of creating that playground for yourself where like your job is part of it, but you can find things something somewhere else. And for me, for example, like I had been a researcher. Now I'm working as a business owner, and there are spaces in which like my job may not fulfill my passions or creative pursuits. And so I started pursuing improv theater. I do poetry. I look for different ways of creating that for myself without the expectation that my 9 to 5 or my job is going to fully fulfill all of it. But that's part of the reason why we work so much on getting to know yourself, getting to know your values. What are your non negotiables? What are the things that you absolutely need to find in your job? Because otherwise, it's not the job for you. And
You're
to
right.
also
It's like a
feel,
relationship because that's what we do. What are my non-negotiables? What is it?
mm-hmm,
What am I looking for? What are the things that I can, I'm willing to compromise on? It's like, I mean, because they say, right, or not they, I hate that phrase. They say it is said
Mm-hmm.
that a majority of our life is spent at work.
Yeah.
And first of all, I think that that's sad, and I shouldn't be. We should, as US citizens, we should, you know we should work to live, not live to work. I fully
Mm-hmm.
believe that. But who knows, we got this thing in our heads. But um so it is a relationship, and a relationship that could turn toxic, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's
And
so
and a
interesting.
relationship that it's like with others, but it's also with yourself,
Hmm.
right? And so for me, one of the things that has happened is I've had, pretty a wide range of experiences, and not all of them made sense, at face value. Eventually I found my way, and I can explain to you why they made sense to me and how each of them were building to, like the steps along the way. But there was a lot of that work of, on one hand, holding the uncertainty, because I've always been a visa holder and an immigrant throughout like my career in the US, which meant that the realm of possibilities was always constrained. But within those constraints, there was also my own understanding of, okay, if I'm pursuing this, is because this is the element of this experience that makes sense to me. This is what I want to get out of this. This is how I'm going to go about it. And so if it worked out, then great. And if it didn't, well, I'll find my way forward. And, again, many of those moments that also included breakdowns and tears and all of these different elements. But there is always a questioning and going back to, like, why am I doing what I'm doing, and what do I want to get out of it, so that it makes sense. I make sure that it makes sense.
One last thing I want to share with people is, um when you decide to sign up for AGV Lab, it's
Hmm.
actually very reasonable, which I think sometimes is when people, they're always afraid, like, to shell out so much money and
Hmm.
not get anything.
Yeah.
On your website says membership is $99 per quarter.
Hmm.
Now, if you are looking for clarity, if you're not sure of what, maybe you are in the right field, but in the wrong position. Maybe you
Hmm.
are, like, maybe you, it is time to explore something completely different. Maybe, I mean, everybody is in a completely different situation,
Yeah.
but oftentimes you see these really exorbitant amounts. So to have something for $99 a quarter
Hmm.
is honestly, like, really amazing. Why? Like, what was the decision behind that?
Yeah. Um, I had always had in mind that I wanted an option that was affordable for people who needed it the most. And in my mind, those are the early and mid-career professionals, particularly graduate students, and particularly international graduate students and recent graduates. Um, because I remember when I was a graduate student, I was lucky enough to come across some coaches that offered free resources, but I was not able to afford coaching, and I needed it.
Mhm.
Um, and so I wanted to make sure that I had an option that was, that made sense and that was affordable for them. That said, there is also the element of, I've always been very aware that I'm very community driven, but to me, community is a verb. So I am not, promoting a membership where anyone comes in and pays and is part of it. And so part of the process, whenever you're interested in AGV Lab or any other of my services, I meet with you and I talk with you about, like, what is it that you need, whether it's a good fit for the things that I offer. And then from there we move forward into whether that is like joining my membership, joining my group coaching program whenever I'm offering it, or working one-on-one. I always go through that process because I want to make sure that it makes sense to everyone who is involved, including those members who are already part of AGV Lab and my communities in general.
I want to make sure that if there's any gaps you want to fill, because I know we could have talked because we could have talked about so much more, right? In throughout your career
Yeah.
trajectory and how you landed here and everything. But I want to be respectful of your time, of our amigos' time, for everybody's time. So if there's anything else that you would like to add, the
Mhm.
floor is yours, amiga.
I appreciate it. Um, if there is one thing that I want people to take away from our conversation is that um, I I do not necessarily take myself too seriously, but I do take seriously whatever I say and whatever I advise and whatever I put out there. And so I know that these are very challenging times and very hard times in many different ways. And what I always hope that, me sharing my experience or my work with others can spark is this idea of possibility from a responsible perspective, right? Like there are a lot of different systems and conditions and constraints that exist, and everyone has their own path. But I often say that the work that I do, I want to create spaces that offer a permission slip to wonder what else is possible for you and to then start taking small steps in that direction. And so I do that, whether that is, like with my services with AGV Lab, with my one on ones, with my workshops and webinars, events that I facilitate. I I want to encourage people to feel less alone in the process of questioning what is right for them.
And that's all we can do, right? But I think questioning is healthy. So we
Mm-hmm.
need to be able to do that, because if we don't question everything, things can turn dangerous. Things can happen. But thank you so much. Oh, share your socials. I know your
Mm-hmm.
website is AGV Services LLC.com. We'll make sure to put that in your show notes. And what are your other social handles?
Yes, and you can also find me on Instagram and Threads at AGV Services LLC. And the biggest space where you can join us is Lucky to Be Here, my podcast that also has a Patreon at patreon.com/lucky to be here, where I'm building community to kind of like continue the conversation in between episodes. And you also get the newsletter where I share the episodes with my own reflections and career development prompts and additional resources as I make them available.
And we will make sure to include all of those links in the show notes as well. Mi gente, thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you reach out. I know Analia has no problem answering any questions if you send her a
Mhm.
DM. Analia, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm so happy that I got to talk to you on the podcast and
Mhm.
everything. And I look forward to seeing what's next. You have anything next
Mhm.
coming up?
I just crossed the first 1,000 downloads on Lucky to Be Here, and
Yeah.
yes, so I'm excited to continue building community that way. I know from the feedback that I get from listeners that is really reaching that goal that I had in mind when I first started it, and continuing building these resources and services to help other people connect with their own story and
Well,
continue seeing it fold.
congratulations.
Yeah,
Congratulations. I'm very excited for you. And
thank you.
until next time, mi gente.
Hola, mi gente. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. If you would like to hear more wine and more chisme, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Saludos.